My name is Taryn Edens. I'm the manager of Housing and Neighborhood Services. Thank you so much for being out here today. Our team is part of the Division of Housing and Neighborhood Services, which is under the Department of Community Development. What our presentation hopes to address is understanding the city's role in addressing housing needs, how to apply for rental licenses, preparing for your inspection, and talking about re-inspections as well. So I just take a moment to share this because our department used to be called Building Safety, and we've now been sort of absorbed under the Community Development Department umbrella. So technically, Community Development is the new name that includes former Building Safety, and we have a lot under our bucket. So that department is held in this building. We share it with police. We're on the other side. And the way I like to explain it to folks is basically if you need to apply for a permit, this is the building to see everyone to get it done. So that includes planners who would look at development applications and permits, plan review, building inspectors, and then naturally rental licenses, and our team is under that umbrella as well. Public Works is also in that building, so often if you have to apply a permit through them, they're here as well. And then we have a couple other groups in our department. So I just wanted to highlight our team. You can see we're off on our own little island over here because we have, I would say, very valuable different roles compared to looking at a permit. So Housing and Neighborhood Services includes housing and rental inspections, and I'll talk a little bit about that team's role, and you'll get to hear from each of the inspectors today as they go through the presentation. And our team also does work in economic development as well as affordable housing policy and programs that I'm going to touch on very lightly, largely just because I have your ear and I want to make you familiar with it to spread the word. And our team also includes code enforcement, both for housing nuisance violations as well as zoning violations. And then lastly, I do have a teammate who specializes in urban design and heritage preservation coordinator. So we're really anything that has to do with housing in neighborhoods, whether it's the quality of housing or promoting supply of housing, that's under our umbrella. So a couple of areas I'm going to focus on and changes that we've made. I want to make sure that those are communicated because the last couple of years have been a time for change, both in moving to a new department and updating our housing code. So I'm just going to touch on those really briefly. We did a rental redesign of our housing code and our program, and then I'm going to touch lightly on some housing programs that are available. So hopefully you're familiar. As I mentioned, we did update our entire housing code. It is now enforced in 2023. If anyone has a rental with a renewal date or a start date of April 1st or later, it takes full effect of the new code. Our code had not been updated in quite some time, not since 2007, and we did an entire update. When I say an entire update, we rewrote it, but the actual changes to what we're looking for are very few. A lot of them were administrative in nature. Our code previously was written kind of in a local, customized manner. We now updated it to align with the International Property Maintenance Code. It's a better way to standardize our code, and it compares well to other communities, essentially. We do have more information about the housing code update on our website. So if you're interested, we do have a summary of what the big changes were, what to expect. I'm just going to touch a couple lightly on some ones that have come up a lot for us. But if you're interested in learning more, we've got a lot of information on our website. So the biggest benefit of our code change was a property incentive system. I wrote proposed, but it is adopted. Essentially, the idea behind this is any rental, once again, that will be inspected April 1st or later, whether that's a renewal date or a start date, is now going to be scored upon inspection and result in a 1, 2, 3, or 4-year inspection cycle. So it's a great way for us to incentivize good compliance and spend more time at those properties that need more attention, frankly. Previously, all rentals were required to be inspected every 2 years. So that is one of the probably biggest benefits of our housing code update. We found that there are a number of other communities that do this, and most of them end up having more properties compliant over time. The other big administrative change were fees. So in general, we were finding that we had a number of expired rental licenses. So we're trying to come at it from both directions. How do we incentivize compliance, and how do we end up penalties as well to try to encourage compliance, really. One change in the code, since we were moving inspection cycles, your renewal fees are going to now be due annually, and that amount is reduced in half. So we found a lot of folks own rentals, not as their primary position or job, right? And so when it came up every other year, they weren't always on top or forgetting, when the renewal fees were due. So now they're going to be due annually to try to encourage better consistency, and then you will be notified when it's your year for inspection, both in the letter and by our team. Otherwise, all of our fees were increased. We hadn't increased any of our fees, penalty fees, since 2007 as well. So here's an example of some of those fees. One that I want to note that we're getting a lot of feedback on currently is our newly added late compliance fee. So essentially, you have about 6 months to make a rental compliant. We'll notify you if you're up for renewal about 3 months in advance. We won't assess any penalties until 3 months past your expiration or the last inspection. As I mentioned, we just have a lot of expired rentals, and so we're trying to find different ways to encourage compliance. So those fees are listed here. These aren't exactly right. It depends on the number of units that you've got and how these will be assessed. As you would imagine, lower density is a lower amount, higher density is a higher amount, and a lot of that has to do with our time spent at higher density properties. So those are just a couple of updates that I wanted to share since I had you here. Now I'm just going to give a quick plug to some of the other things that our team does under Housing and Neighborhood Services, just because you're here and I'm sure you're all stakeholders in the community. Our team also supports affordable housing policies and programs. This work is pretty collaborative. The city has a role in that, Olmsted County has a role in that, and then we also have a nonprofit kind of consortium called the Housing Coalition. So it's just something to keep in mind if you happen to have an interest in affordable housing. There are different programs held at each of those agencies that could be of interest to you. This is sort of an example of who does what as it relates to housing programs locally. You'll see the city supports a lot of housing that I would say is better suited for workforce housing, so housing that's affordable to folks earning between 50 and 100% of the area median income, whereas the county has a lot more resources for folks in highly subsidized housing, right? And the coalition is another agency that we both sit on. So I just wanted to share really briefly, since you folks are interacting with a whole range of populations, to get an idea of where you might go to. For example, they're not here today, but Olmsted County does have a team that provides housing stability services. So you'll find sometimes we refer folks to that depending on the situation when we get involved from an enforcement perspective. And then this is my little plug for some housing programs that we have for you to share. That's under our umbrella of work as well. We do have a federal grant that is available for folks to apply for on an annual basis. Generally that's served through nonprofits, so if you happen to serve on one, or any work that you do benefits folks who are primarily low income, feel free to connect with me at the end and I'd be happy to add you to our list for applying for a grant through that program. We do have a rehab program as well. So this has been around since about 1983, and it provides deferred loans for owner-occupied units who income qualify, which is a great program to both maintain our housing stock in our community and also support home ownership. We did our first rental rehab pilot this year, so we do want to expand that to rentals. And so that's something hopefully you've seen in our emails if you're currently a rental manager. And we did a 4-plex and it's going very well. So our plan is once we do that, we can have another program available for rental rehabs. And the idea there is what can we do to preserve our naturally occurring affordable housing. There's a lot of deferred maintenance, particularly from the onset of the pandemic. So what can we do to provide funding opportunities for that in an effort to ideally maintain rents and help out property managers that have a mission to serve that population. We also have a lead abatement program. I'll call it a lead hazard remediation program that is available right now to rentals. We do have a number of landlords signed up for that, and that is a grant program. I think we got increased amount to allow up to $23,000 per rental unit. You do have to have a home that's built in 1978 or later, and your residents do have to income qualify, or you have to show us that you provide fair market rents. But that is another program that's available if you have deferred maintenance and you qualify. You can reach out to me when we're done. I'm happy to connect you to our teammate who leads that program. We have a couple of others. I'm just going to brush through them, or I'll skip over them for now for sake of time. But you might have heard that we launched an accessory dwelling unit pilot program. So if anyone's interested in building an ADU, we want to incentivize that as well through a grant that we have available. And we have others. So if you're interested in maintaining or building affordable housing, we've got programs for you and be happy to connect you. So thanks for my little plug. Next, we're going to talk really briefly about short-term rentals. We started enforcing short-term rentals in 2022, I think. Time kind of escapes me with the pandemic. So a short-term rental, you're probably familiar. That's what a government is going to call an Airbnb or VRBO. We regulate them just like a regular rental. So to me, a short-term rental means you have folks staying for 30 days or less. They're not on an official lease, and you're advertising it on platforms like Airbnb and VRBO. So short-term rentals are also required to obtain a rental license. If they're not owner-occupied, they're inspected exactly like a rental. One of our housing inspectors specifically is dedicated to inspecting short-term rentals. Owner-occupied short-term rentals are required to register with the city, but they're not inspected. If you have questions, feel free to let me know, but essentially you would apply the same as you would for a rental, which I'll talk about. They get inspected the same timeline as a regular rental. They're going to be scored and part of the property incentive system, just like a regular rental. The license cost is exactly the same as a rental. And I kind of mentioned the difference between owner-occupied and not owner-occupied. One of the caveats with short-term rentals is we do limit how many you can have in a multifamily building. That's primarily because of building and zoning codes. Once you have more than 3 units, you're essentially considered a hotel at that point, and you have to meet higher accessibility requirements. So the best way to remember it is you can have basically up to 2 short-term rentals no matter how many units you have. Once you have more than that, you have to essentially apply for a change of use and show that you're meeting code requirements. Some buildings do that automatically. One you might be familiar with is the very tall Berkman apartments. They had planned to have short-term rentals from the get-go, so their units that are dedicated to short-term rentals are meeting accessibility requirements from the get-go. So it is possible. Zoning has their own requirements too. If you do more than 3, they have limitations on what's a primary use. So there's something in there that says if you meet those requirements, you still can't have more than 25% of your units on short-term rentals, otherwise they also consider it a hotel. So just, if you have questions because you're looking to make some multifamily units, short-term rentals, just reach out to us, essentially. All right, I'm going to cover briefly how to apply for a rental license. We are moving to paperless. We do have a great administration team who is willing to help folks if you want to come into the office. We have kiosks available if anyone has concerns with that. But our entire building permit process has moved to paperless, and we are looking to do the same. So we do have an online form that if you complete goes right to our team and gets documented with us, and it really expedites the process. We charge a building fee, a unit fee, and a one-time zoning fee. And then after that, as I mentioned, you pay that fee on an annual basis just for the building and unit fee. The fee can be mailed, made in person, and we also have an online payment option that I'll talk about. You have to complete the public safety exam, which you're all doing right now, and we have a couple of options for that. Once you've done this, you're done. You don't have to go through this course again. We require 1 teammate to have it, right? So we're talking about property management companies. You do have to have someone employed, right, that's taken the course. So we'll often see regional managers take it, for example. And then you want to schedule your inspection. For most new use rentals, we require 90 minutes for an inspection. Going forward, it's about an hour. It really depends for multifamily buildings and number of units. It can be a lot more for us, so it just sort of depends. You can call us or email us to schedule your inspection. I'll show you kind of our general email to get the fastest response. Our administration team is usually good about responding within 24 hours. We do require a representative present for the inspection. That's primarily for liability reasons. And they have to be listed as a contact with the rental record as well. Other helpful tools, this is the email of our admin team, rbsrental@rochestermn.gov. 3 folks monitor that, so that really is the fastest way to get a hold of us. Even if you have an inspection question, you can certainly reach out to an inspector, myself. But if you start with them, they're probably going to connect you to the person who's most available. We also have a tool called Citizen Access. It's basically like a public-facing database. So all of our rental records are public. Anyone can access them, yourselves included. And we have some information here on Citizen Access and more information on our website. We really try to promote Citizen Access. If you ever email us, it's in a lot of our signature blocks, including instructions on how to use it. And that's where you can go to make payments online. So if you have a big portfolio of rentals, highly recommend you get plugged into Citizen Access. Once again, our administration team is happy to help you because it really helps all of us. If you're able to use that, you're able to set it up to see your entire portfolio and kind of manage it that way. So we're very happy to help you do that, but that is the best way that you can see fees. When our team will be moving to emailing out all of our notices of violation after inspection, they're automatically uploaded to the record in the Citizen Access as well. So it's a great way to stay tuned on how your rental is doing. All right, so with that, we're going to transition into preparing for a rental housing inspection. I'd like to introduce our Chief Inspector, Lori Jones. I should give little synopsis of everyone. Lori's been with the team for quite some time and has a background in both real estate and property management, and she's going to be talking about emergency escape and rescue openings. So I'm going to stay up here because she's got a fun demonstration for you all as we talk about windows.
Emergency escape and rescue windows, they are required in all areas that you have in your home that you use for sleeping. Bedrooms are a given. We also run into, typically in splits, where people have a bedroom in the living room in the bottom of a split. That needs an egress emergency escape window. They are different from any other window in your house. They have specific codes that they have to meet, specific sizes. These windows obviously are not going to be egress, but what the typical, the minimum height of an egress window has to be a 24-inch opening, okay? The width has to be a minimum of 20 inches. If you don't have that, when you go and check, if you're going to purchase a property, you don't have that minimum, you're not going to meet egress. If you do have that 20-inch width, 24-inch height, you need, on an existing window, 720 square inches of open space. This is your typical double hung. You have your width, we measure from the opening. The part that's protruding the most, we take from here to here, and then of course we measure from here to here. It's not from here to here or here to here. So in this case, we got a width of 18 inches. That's not going to cut it. And of course we don't have a height of 11 inches. So right away it's going to be a no-go for an egress window. Most double hung windows are not going to meet egress. Just so you know, if you walk into a property and you see a double hung window, the first thing I would do is measure it. There are some larger double hung windows that do meet egress, but that's something you're going to have to measure. And then on our casement window, you got to be careful on casements because they can be, you can just go in and say, oh, I've got a casement window, it's going to meet egress. Not so much. So in this case, this casement, if you measure the opening, see where it's going to go right to where this window is, where the opening is. It's not going to the frame, it's going to where the opening of the window is. Can you all see that? Okay. So this is not even going to meet egress. It's 13 inches. Okay, and you'll run into a lot of that with casement windows where the window is protruding out into the opening. Okay, hardware, right here, you see the hardware? It's protruding about 3 inches in. You're losing opening because when you open that window, that's where that window is going to open. So you got to really watch out on casement windows too. Now the height, you're going to have more than 24 inches, but you don't have your width. So this does not meet egress either. 24 height, 20-inch width, minimum. But you have to have 720 square inch total opening. Now, if you're going to replace the egress window, you have to have 820 square inches for a new window. Then we have the issue about windowsill. Most houses that we go and inspect are going to be at a 48-inch windowsill. Maybe a little higher because back in the day they measured from floor to sill, the bottom of the sill. We now have a 44-inch code where the windowsill has to be at 44 inches. We're going to be a little flexible with that. If we go into a new use and your windowsill is at 48, we're probably going to say, you know what, it was built back then, we're going to leave it alone. But if the window does not meet egress and you have to replace the window, you're gonna have to meet the 44-inch window sill height. So it might mean you might have to dig down, do a little construction on it. So that's another change to our code that happened in January. The other thing we find out, we'll go to inspections and you're so excited you bought this house, the windows are brand new, everything looks great. We go in there, brand new windows don't need egress. They're gonna have to be changed out. And what happened was that whoever put those windows in did not get a permit. Anytime you put a egress window in, you need a permit. Now, you as the homeowner can put the window in. You don't need a licensed contractor to put a window in. You can do that yourself. But it is very important that you pull a permit and that permit is issued by the time we go back and do a reinspection. If it's not issued, you're gonna get a $75 fee. So you don't need a permit to put in a living room window. It's your egress windows that need a permit. And up here, there's a chart that you can use to kind of do your math on the window. Is the clear open height at least 24 inches? Is the clear openable width 20 inches? And then check the distance from the bottom of from the floor up to the opening of the window for your sill height. So from here, Cassie, if you want to check, to here is where we're measuring now. The bottom of the window. Okay? 44 is the highest it can be. The other thing we deal with is window wells. Window wells have to be a total of 9 square feet. So 3 feet by 3 feet by 3 feet. And if they don't meet those measurements, they have to be manipulated to meet the 9 square feet. And we have a 44-inch depth that is allowed. So when we go from grade and measure up to the top of the window well, if it's higher than 44 inches, you need to put a ladder in. And that ladder cannot obstruct the opening of the window. Okay? So it has to be a clear opening.
Next, we're going to hear from our inspector, Jay Bohan. Jay has a background in fire. Jay is our short-term rental inspector, and he also does code enforcement for us specifically as well.
I do the headroom. I'm presenting the headroom area. As you go downstairs, whether you're going into the basement or you're going up to the upper level of the home, you have to have 6'4" headroom height, as you see there. The problem with that is you can see the plane that we measure on. We don't go by the nose of the step. We go by this plane here. All right? Because as you walk down the stairs, you find out that someone like me, a taller person, I'll hit my head. But if I get on the tread, I'm usually okay. It doesn't mean it meets what it's supposed to meet. So we measure that to be 6'4" minimum, going up and down the stairs, whichever level you're going to. If you have to have the area raised, you have to pull a permit because you're dealing with the structure. If you don't pull a permit, I come in and you say, yeah, I just fixed it, that's probably not going to pass because we have our building inspectors come out to make sure you did it correctly. All right, so you'll hear that from me. You'll say, make sure you always hear from me. If you need to pull a permit, I'm going to tell you to pull a permit. So make sure you pull that. Our building inspector will come out and they'll check that out to make sure you meet your 6'4" headroom up and down the stairs. Okay, the next thing is we got handrails and guardrails. Handrails requirements are there. When you get a letter from us with the handrails on it, it'll tell you what the height has to be. It's 34 to 38 inches if I'm not mistaken. 36, okay. So you want to make sure it's there. The other thing you look at is you look at the space between the balustrades. Can't be, we just say keep it at 4 inches and you're good to go. The reason for that, kids don't stick their heads in there and get stuck in. They can't slip through. So you want to make sure that that opening is not, like it says, a 5-inch sphere can't go through it. So you want to make sure that there are opportunities that we also say that you can just put up like a piece of a sheet of plywood or something like that. So you can just cover that whole opening yourself. That's kind of up to you. You don't have to put in a guardrail like this. You can put in a sheet of plywood or something like that. Just the big thing we're looking at is if your tenants have young ones, they're going downstairs, maybe to do laundry or going upstairs, whatever, the kid doesn't fall off the side and get injured. So that's protecting you as a property owner. So you want to make sure you have those requirements there. The handrails, if you have to put a handrail on, it has to have returns. As you see on the bottom there, that's a return to the wall itself. You can't leave it just sticking out like you'll see at most homes, the older homes, they just have a handrail come straight down. The reason for that, and I think there's a photo on here, is, well, not there yet, but it's so your coat doesn't get caught on it, your clothes don't get caught on it when you're going up. So the return to the wall is supposed to eliminate that from happening. So if you put in a new handrail, it has to be put in that way. Generally, most handrails are put in that way anyway. So this talks about the height of the handrail, 34 to 38 inches. Now that is measured off the stair tread, off there. So that is measured there. So that's different than your headroom. So you have to make sure it falls within that area. If it doesn't, we'll have you raise it up so it meets that requirement. That's generally, I think, considered that's what most people are comfortable hanging on to as they go up the stairs, rather than reaching way down here, reaching up over your head to stabilize yourself. And that goes for your outside decks as well. Most of the places you purchase with outside decks with existing handrails, they don't meet current requirements. It has to be a grippable handrail. A grippable handrail is something you can get your hand around to like this point here. Not like this. That's not grippable, because if you're falling and you try to grab a 2x4 or 2x6, you're just going to go down. This way here, you can actually close it with your hand. So generally on decks, on new uses, I get a lot of them with short-term rental. 9 times out of 10, they got to put in a grippable handrail. You still have to put it to the same height, and it still has to have returns. So just so you know, if you're doing short-term rentals, that's what's going to happen, or even with the other inspectors as well.
Thanks, Jay. I'll introduce our next inspector, Mike Engstrom. Mike has a background in property maintenance, specifically for rentals. So we're going to talk about smoke alarms, steer detectors, and garbage disposals.
Good morning, thank you. So I'm going to start here with talking about where to install your smoke detectors and a little bit about interconnection. As you can see, they got smoke detectors in the bedrooms, smoke detectors directly outside of the bedrooms, a smoke detector on every level, including the basements, you can see. And where more than one smoke detector is required, they should be interconnected. That's in existing homes. You don't have to have interconnected in existing homes unless alterations or repairs have been made that allows access to run those wires. Smoke detectors that are interconnected, if you can see in the second and third pictures there, the smoke is in the basement setting off that one smoke alarm. All the additional smoke alarms are sounding. In the first picture, those are just single station. One smoke detector goes off, that's it. You're not notified in the rest of the home. So if they are interconnected, if they are hardwired smoke detectors like the second picture there, if you're replacing a smoke detector, it needs to be replaced with a wired smoke detector. So if it's hardwired, it needs to remain hardwired. Now when you're mounting a smoke detector, the best place to mount it is on the ceiling there. And you want to stay more than 4 inches away from that wall. That's dead air space. So you want to make sure it's out where it will detect the smoke. If you are mounting them on the wall, they need to be mounted more than 4 inches from the ceiling and less than 12. Again, we want to make sure that if there's smoke in the house, they're going to detect the smoke. Smoke detectors should not be installed near cooking appliances. Ionization smoke detectors need to be located more than 20 feet away from a cooking appliance. If the ionization smoke detector has a silence, it needs to be more than 10 feet from the cooking appliance. And if we put up a photoelectric smoke detector, it needs to be more than 6 feet from the appliance. I would say when in doubt, more than 20 feet, just to be safe. We don't want these going off when people are cooking. Your tenants are going to take them down, and now you're not protected. Bathrooms, we want to keep those smoke detectors more than 3 feet away from the bathroom door. Okay? Unless there's no other place. I mean, if it's on the level and you only have a 3-foot hallway outside the bathroom where the bedrooms are, still needs to be there. But if you can, more than 3 feet from the bathroom. And the same goes for vents or fans. We want those smoke detectors more than 3 feet away from vents and fans. And this includes the ceiling fans. Yes, we do allow the wireless interconnections. However, if modifications or alterations are made in the home where you can wire it, we do want that done as well. That's the building code. Anything that removes the finishing of the wall to make access to run those wires. All right, now smoke detectors need to be tested and maintained according to the manufacturer's instructions. When smoke detectors do not operate or are older than 10 years old, they need to be replaced. When the smoke detectors sit on the shelf for a year or so, you really lose that time because it is from the manufacturer's date. All right, carbon monoxide detectors. Carbon monoxide detectors need to be installed outside each bedroom within 10 feet of that sleeping room. If there's a fuel burning appliance in the bedroom or an attached bathroom, the CO detector needs to be in the bedroom. Other than that, just remember 10 feet from each bedroom. And then the carbon monoxide detectors also need to be maintained, replaced if they're not working, end of life signal, or old again. In this house, so that upstairs landing in between the two bedrooms, that could be one detector. That could be a combo smoke and fire detector. That can be a combo, so you could just need one device there. If that is just a smoke detector, you're going to need a carbon monoxide detector there as well. You still need the smoke detector in each bedroom. Okay. But that would just be a smoke detector, period. The combo out in this hallway would just cover your smoke for that hallway, that level of the bedrooms, and the carbon monoxide for those bedrooms. Garbage disposals. All right, you can see some of the things that we find very often. Garbage disposal is making a loud noise. Garbage disposal is leaking. Garbage disposal is bound up, does not operate. All right, the garbage disposal needs to be kept free from obstructions, leaks, and needs to be able to perform as it was designed. So if it doesn't work, it needs to be fixed. So yes, garbage disposals need to function properly when we're there. No leaks, nothing bound up in there. If the garbage disposals are removed, the wires have to be properly terminated. As you can see in the picture of that junction box, that's not proper. We need to cap those wires, put a cover on that box. That needs to be covered up so nobody accidentally shocks themselves. Romex clamp, you can see that picture. That is a clamp that needs to be fastened to the garbage disposal where the power cord goes. Again, that needs to be in place and secured to eliminate the electric shock hazard.
All right, we're going to move along. So hopefully as you're realizing, we're going through what we're seeing often in inspections, right? Things that we're looking for. So now we're going to get into just general common findings. So I'm going to pass it over to Inspector Josh. She also has a property maintenance background in apartment buildings. And like I said, now we're going to get into kind of odds and ends, things we see and call out.
All right, good morning, everybody. First thing I'm going to talk about is fire extinguishers. We've got a few different rules on fire extinguishers. If you are running a lot of single-family homes or duplexes, they aren't required. You don't need to have them, but we do recommend them because things do happen. For any house or structure that has 3 or more units, including townhomes and rooming houses, they are required in each unit or within 75 feet of every bedroom door in a rooming house. So, and those extinguishers can be just the regular ABC kind, as you see here. That covers most household issues. They do make other kinds that hopefully you won't need in the house. And these need to be inspected or serviced every year or replaced every year if you get just the single non-use rechargeable ones. Furnace filters and permits. So we run into a lot of furnace filters that are either missing or they don't get changed regularly and they're very clogged up. We want to make sure we're getting those changed out. It's kind of up to you what you want to do, if you have a schedule that you want to change them out on your own, or if you want to leave it up to the tenant. And you want to make sure that they're using the appropriate filter for your furnace. I know a lot of people suffer with allergies, they have pets, so they want to use a lot of those really higher MERV rated allergen filters. What happens with those is you don't get the airflow you need, they clog up faster, you need to change them more often. On the other end of that, they also sell the really chintzy kind of fiberglass ones where you can literally pour salt on them and the salt will fall right through. Probably not the best for your furnace either. As far as permits, whenever you replace a furnace, an AC, water heater, I like to call them stationary appliances. They're the appliances in the home that you're not going to take with you when you move. They require a permit and an inspection. We run into it quite often where someone's replaced a furnace, water heater, AC. They pulled the permit, but they never had the following inspection, or they have the inspection and there was corrections and those were never made. So just make sure you're working with your contract, staying in contact with them, and just make sure there's no leftover corrections made from that final inspection. Any new electrical work in the home needs a permit no matter what. Now, if you're replacing just a light switch or an outlet, we don't require permits for that, but if you're adding something, what we see quite often is for sump pumps running on extension cords because they didn't add an outlet close enough for them to reach. So you're going to want to get a hold of an electrician, have them pull the permit, get it done properly. And again, have that final inspection to get it closed out. New windows require a permit, as Lori kind of covered before. That's mostly for the egress windows. And your contractors are responsible for scheduling and completing those permits and inspections. So that's really important just when you're working with them to make sure they are pulling those. I'd highly recommend you guys ask them for the permit number when they get going and make sure that it's closed out before you sign off on the work, that you're happy with it and complete. And all outstanding permits should be resolved before rental inspection. I do believe we can see that on Citizen Access, so it wouldn't be a bad thing to look up your properties on there and just see if there are any open permits. Multiplex outlets, we see this quite often, especially in the older homes where you might only have 1 or 2 outlets in each room. You know, the main thing we're looking for is the high draw appliances, right? So we don't want to see you know, the daisy chain Christmas thing going, running like 10 freezers, your fridge, your stove, everything like that on there. So, you know, make sure they're your high draw appliances, mostly microwaves is what we see, sometimes fridges, that they get plugged right into the walls. Same with like deep freeze, chest freezers, things like that. Electrical boxes and panels. I mean, we've all seen these before. We just want to make sure that all those slots are covered up. That's a lot of power back there on those back bars. We don't want any little kids or anyone sticking their fingers back in there and getting lit up like a Christmas tree. That's not a fun day. Also with the electrical boxes, you need a 3-foot by 3-foot opening in front of them. We see it every once in a while where they're in the laundry room. We can obviously reach over the laundry equipment to reach those boxes still. That's okay. We just don't want you to put your china hutch in front of it, or, you know, a big immovable piece of furniture, so that way we can access it. Also, your tenants should be able to access it too in case they do trip a breaker. So you can have shelving and storage stuff there, just try not to cover that panel or make it impossible to open that door without moving anything. So electrical boxes, receptacles, outlets, and GFIs need to be in working order and have cover plates on them. Usually we don't see too many issues with boxes. We do see broken or missing covers quite often, and broken outlets. So just make sure those are all covered, working properly, no exposed conductors. And this is kind of that Christmas tree thing, dealing with extension cords. Extension cords are not to be used as permanent wiring. Temporary wiring is fine, you know, your Christmas lights, holiday decorations, anything like that. You can have those up, that is fine. We don't want to see them used again for your hydro appliances unless they are a UL listed approved appliance cord. And we will look for that tag on there, so if you do buy one of those, make sure that tag stays on there, or if your tenant buys one. All right, bath fans and exhaust fans. These we come across quite often. This bottom picture here is mostly what we find with the bath fans. It's something people don't usually think about. They get clogged up, they get a lot of that really fine dust, almost like the dryer vents get. That gets inside on the motor, those motors overheat, and then you start a fire. So we're really looking at the covers because that kind of indicates how dirty that motor inside could be as well. So when you're going through, if you're doing pre-inspections, just make sure that that's getting done. Maybe make your tenant aware so that way they can kind of clean off the outside and keep it from building up too, because then that also limits your airflow, and then you start having growth issues in your shower with those high moisture areas. With the range vents, light bulbs in those, whether it's an over the range microwave, range hoods, that kind of falls under the if it's there it's got to work rule. It's probably one of the most common things we call out, along with having a cover on that light. If it is just the range hood, we see a lot of bare bulbs, and the worry there is when people are cooking, a lot of people fry these days, you get a lot of that oil up there, kind of builds up. If that bulb gets hot, you could have a fire. For the older bathrooms, I mean, if you're not required to have a bath fan if you have an openable window in there. So, because that's the main thing is the ventilation. So a lot of older homes will see they don't have them, but they still have a window. Now, if it comes to the point where you redo that bathroom and you do a 3-piece wall surround, get rid of the tile because the wall's falling apart, and you close off that window and remove it, you're gonna have to get a bath fan installed, which is gonna require that electrical permit and a mechanical permit for adding the ducting. So you're gonna need both permits to get that installed. And then the other thing with the range hood filters or fans is just make sure those filters on the bottom are in place. So, you know, most of these over the range vent fans, they do and microwaves, they do have an option where it can vent outside. So if you are doing that route, you're going to add an outside vent, then you'll need to add that mechanical permit to it. And if you have to run electrical, you'll have to pull that permit as well. Otherwise, most of the time what happens is they get installed and they just run on that recirculation mode. So they'll pull the fumes in, run it through like a charcoal filter and spew it back out the top.
All right, thanks, Josh. We've got one more section of common inspection findings. So I'll introduce Inspector Cassie. She also has a property maintenance background in rentals.
So we run into a lot of peeling paint. Usually it's in the bathrooms. So big source of humidity and moisture. And if the paint is older or if it's not designed for that sort of environment, it will start to flake and fall apart. So it's really important to make sure that when you do work, you only want to do it once, so let's do it properly. So make sure you get all the old stuff scraped away, get rid of as much as you can. Use a primer and or paint that is made for a high moisture environment. It's also a good idea to get something that has some resistance to the mildew that shows up when things get trapped and moist in there. So not all fans are on the same switch as the light, and a lot of tenants don't use that fan for various reasons. So even if it's available, it's best to have that extra added protection to make sure that you don't have to scrape your ceiling every 2 years when we show up and make you do it. Caulking is another one where when you put in the work the first time, you shouldn't have to deal with it ever again. So, you know, it's amazing how much water can get past some of that cracked and missing caulking. So it's really important to make sure it maintains its integrity and keeps that water out. So when you have cracking, splitting, caulking, or if it's getting all discolored because it's the wrong kind of caulk, it's best to scrape it all away, get rid of all of it, start over fresh, get a mildew-resistant caulking on there to make sure that you only have to do this once, because it's not a fun job to do. On the exterior of the house, this would not pass rental code here, so it's easy to forget to look up a lot with our houses, so, and especially as much wind as we've had the last year or two, there's been a lot of damage to roofs and sidings and the chimneys too. It's important to keep an eye on those, make sure that you're not losing any of that mortar and have some loose bricks, because I did have a chimney fall off of the top of a house and land on the roof and punched a hole in the roof. So thankfully the chimney didn't go all the way through the roof. I'm kind of amazed that didn't happen, but it's important to look up and make sure you're looking for things that just don't look right. You know, you got your loose splashing sticking out, or you know, your shingles curling up, just to prevent a much larger project when you start getting water dripping down into the home and causing issues for you and your tenant. Dryer vents are really important to keep clean. I've seen some pretty full ones. I have seen some that are full, like the one on the right. So, and you know, when you figure we're there every 2 years, it doesn't take that long to get that full. We do have a constant battle with the critters in town, so definitely aware that squirrels, birds like that warmth, and they like to crawl in there and stuff. So even though we don't allow that screen over the top of the vent, because it just collects and holds that lint and doesn't give it a chance to escape, so we do require those to be removed. But we did some research and we found a dryer vent that's made for keeping birds and things out. So if you are having issues, this is something to look into. We had to order online, but it actually has 2 flaps. So even though I've seen birds get pretty tricky on things, it'd be pretty hard for them to move the 2 flaps. And one flap does have a very weak magnet on it to kind of keep it from getting popped open by a birdie, but it's still weak enough that the air from the dryer venting will pop it open, so it'll function properly. You don't want any holes in your exterior, so roofs, walls, soffits, pieces that got blown off or they're separating, because birds and bats seem to hone in on those things and they will make a nest as soon as an opening appears, it seems like. So, and once they're in it's hard to get rid of them, especially bats in particular. They're protected. You can't get rid of them. You basically just have to prevent them from coming back in. So it's just important to prevent that as much as possible as soon as you start seeing any breakdown in your exterior, to address it right away. The surface paint, it's important to keep up on that, because it's a lot easier to paint than it is to go through and replace boards, you know, periodically. And definitely before the point you have to build a whole new deck, because that is expensive and you do need a permit for that too. Gutters and downspouts, they're not required, but they need to be cleaned out periodically after all the leaves fall in the fall or in the spring, and make sure to keep that water away from the house as much as possible. So now is the time of year to make sure that all those downspouts are put on and that they're not full of leaves and debris and things that could lead the water to running down the side of the house or down into the foundation. Could need some compromised foundations or flooded basements. Garbage, all dwellings or apartment units must be supplied with the storage containers, and they have to be proportional to the occupancy. So you can't just have one little can for a 4-plex. That usually doesn't work. If garbage every week, so every week it needs to be cleaned up, so it can't sit out for any longer than that. And you can set the containers up curbside the night before, but then they need to be picked back up as soon as possible after the garbage has been picked up on garbage day. In our code that started this year, we've started enforcing backflow devices on things like the handheld shower heads. We have already been requiring bidets have a backflow. They have to have a built-in backflow because of the rating dealing with the toilet needs a higher rating backflow, so they need to be built in. And the idea is they're a water nozzle below the rim of the toilet, so they don't want any dirty, contaminated water getting into that clean water supply. If you're to lose pressure, it just sucks it right in, and that's not a pleasant thought to think of. So that's why we require those bidets to have backflows on them. So now we also require handheld shower heads to also have a backflow device on them. It's not rated as high as the bidet ones, so they're much more common and affordable, but it's just something, if you're gonna put a handheld shower head, or if your tenant does in their shower, that needs that rating on there to make sure that it has that backflow device. Because same idea, if the shower head were to go below the tub, the edge of the tub, and into a tub full of water, it could also lose pressure and suck that water up into the clean water supply. So it's just prevention of that, that scenario that could potentially happen in your typical home. So is that perfect? Thanks.
Cassie, any questions for Cassie? All right, thanks everyone. I know that was a lot of content. We do want properties to be compliant. So that really covers a lot of our most common findings. And now I'm going to talk about conducting the re-inspection. So if you are not familiar, as mentioned, when you're establishing a new rental, we require a new use inspection. And that's when we'll go through everything with you. We honestly anticipate to find corrections, right? So when I was talking about the property scoring system, we want you to do well. So if you have a couple of common things, it doesn't mean you're going to do poorly on your outcome. We anticipate finding things, right? And we're looking to help you, as mentioned well here, maintain your property. We're looking for things that might cause bigger problems in the future, right? So when we do that, we'll be communicating with you in the field on what issues we find, and then we will issue what has to be called a notice of violation. It's just a listing of the corrections. We give you generally 30 days to resolve those. There's some exceptions. Fire smoke detectors, you got to address that right away. That's a life safety hazard. But everything else, you get about 30 days to fix it. So generally, we recommend scheduling your inspection right away, because often we're out 4 to 6 weeks. It really depends on the season. But if you have it scheduled, great. You're showing us that you're being diligent and responding. And then we would conduct a re-inspection. So ideally, you get everything resolved by the re-inspection. So I kind of just talked through all of that. You're responsible for scheduling the re-inspection. We want to fit with your schedule, make sure you're ready for it. If all of those items are not met by the re-inspection, that's when we would assess a $75 fee, as Lori mentioned. So you've got a couple of chances, right, to get everything corrected. As also mentioned by one of the inspectors, we certainly recommend a pre-inspection. We find that they're not done often. So really, one of our goals with the property incentive system is to give you a reason and encourage you, and maybe your manager, give them some reason that it's financially beneficial to do a pre-inspection if we'll come out there less, right? We do have extension requests available for extenuating circumstances. So if something is happening, I guess often ones we hear, which we're hearing less frequently now, are, our windows are back ordered. Now we're finding more suppliers have them. It just depends. In those situations, if you show us, I ordered the window, here's when it's going to get here, we do ask that you submit a formal extension request. We have a documented it shows us you're doing your due diligence as well. And then, we'll respect that and schedule the inspection for a date that we agree on. So there is a formal process for that on our website, and our chief inspector reviews those requests. If you have 3 or less violations, and they're easily corrected, and we could tell by photo that you did it, we will accept photos. So that's a 3 or less limitation. We'll tell you if we think it could be done that way. We have a place online you can go to submit your photos. So we do ask that you do that versus sending it to each of the inspectors. It's a way we can all make sure it's accounted for. So we have a compliance photo upload site for that. We are looking to changing it to something more user friendly, but now we've got a link that takes you there, shows you how to sign up and submits it to us. Here's an example of what it looks like. Shows 4 pictures, because you might want to show us different angles of something, and you'll want to talk through. Make sure you include the address of your property so we know what it's for. And it describes, what you did to resolve the corrections that we called out. The last thing I'll say is, be sure you get your rental certificate. That's how you know everything's tied up. Sometimes we have back and forth with folks and they think it's on us. Sometimes it is on us. Sometimes we're waiting for a response from you. You'll know everything's tied up when you get your rental certificate. We used to mail those out. We're now emailing them out automatically. Those are also available if you need an extra copy on Citizen Access, like I mentioned. So you'll know everything's tied up when you get your rental certificate. Those are supposed to be displayed in your rental too, so that'll remind you, when it's expired as well.